On April 4, 2021, France banned the headscarf for anyone under the age of 18. President Emmanuel Macron has said that hijabs are not in accordance with French ideals. French Muslim women are saying it's their right to wear whatever they like, with slogans like "hands off our hijabs." But the French or even European obsession with what Muslims wear is not new. And the Western conception of the veil goes back to the European colonization of the Middle East, and even further before that. Here's what happened. By the 19th century, European powers, especially Britain and France, started to colonize large chunks of the Middle East. This led to more European travelers arriving in the region, and many were fascinated with the veil. They began writing about the veil in their travel diaries, in their literature, their art, and the photography they produced for European audiences. Except they did so without really talking to Muslim women about it. In the colonial mind and discourse, the veil came to symbolize both the oppression and eroticism of Muslim women. Elite Arab families organized separate living quarters for men and women. Non-elite families could not afford this, as women often had to work outside and because their homes were not large enough. In elite families, the harem was part of the house designated for the woman. The harem has been widely debated by many academics and is an issue of contention among Muslim scholars. But to the colonial imagination, the harem was simplified and misrepresented. This is a video produced by British Pathé, a producer of newsreels and documentaries in the 20th century. To Western onlookers, the harem was the place Muslim men imprisoned their women and the place where women beautified themselves endlessly so they could satisfy the insatiable sexual appetite of their husbands. And they went to great lengths to construct this fantasy. European photographers booked studios to stage harems using props like water pipes and slaves, and hired women to pose with veils, looking bored and unhappy. All the visual art was complemented by written projections of what Muslim women apparently felt. William Howard Russell, a British journalist, wrote about how the harem must drive women out of their senses, and how Muslim women must have envied the freedom of European women. A French noblewoman, Catherine Fauchet, who toured the Middle East in 1898, expressed pity for these women who must live useless and dull lives. Then there was the veil. This 1893 photograph by James Boyle featured at a World Fair in Chicago. Boyle described the veil as a revolting disguise and used it as a mark of civilization. Lord Cromer, the controller of Egypt from 1877 to 1880, claimed that the veil and the seclusion of women exercises a baneful effect on society. To colonizers, the veil was backward and signified the oppression of women and the primitiveness of Islam. Egyptian and Algerians who veiled were the least civilized. Indians who partially veiled were more civilized. Europeans who didn't veil at all were civilization. And by colonizing countries, they were bringing civilization to inferior people. So, Europe's project to unveil women symbolically and literally was about civilizing Muslim societies and served as a political justification for colonization. Despite the veil being construed as backward and oppressive, there was also European fascination around its mystery. What was behind the veil? To European eyes, the veiled woman was sexualized and begging to be seen. Staged photographs of women lifting their veils and exposing their naked bodies were turned into popular postcards for the French, which constructed a fantasy of the erotic, sexual power of Muslim women when they lifted the veil. In Algeria, the veil took center stage during the Algerian War of Independence. Frantz Fanon, an anti-colonial intellectual, claimed that the French strategy to destroy Algerians' capacity for resistance focused on destroying the structure of Algerian society, by conquering the women and going to find them from behind the veil. In 1958, mass unveiling ceremonies were staged across Algeria. The wives of French military unveiled some Algerian women in public ceremonies to symbolize they had been won over by European values. Later, historians found that many of the women who participated were either pressurized into it or had never worn the veil before. In response to the unveiling ceremonies, the veil became a symbol of colonial resistance for many Algerian women. Female resistance fighters even used the hic, a form of dress to hide and smuggle explosives. In 1960, Marc Ranger, an official regimental photographer, was ordered to take identity photos of 2,000 men and women in Bourg-Cris, a village 120 kilometers from Algiers. The women were forced to remove their veils for the cameras. He managed to smuggle 6 portraits of the women out of the country, and the photos have been widely interpreted, even by the photographer, as symbols of the violence of colonial domination. During the war, French soldiers also used a campaign of widespread rape and torture against Algerian women. Raphael Blanchet, a French historian, claims that the rape was usually a collective act used as an expression of power, humiliation, and revenge against Muslim Algerian society and its values of female honor. Algerian men were often forced to look on. Some French soldiers also took trophy photos, usually of a naked woman standing between two soldiers. Today, the headscarf, hijab, or veil is complex. It may mean different things to different Muslim women around the world. But are countries in Europe who are trying to police what Muslim women wear still stuck on colonial projections of the hijab? Why are predominantly white men who claim to celebrate personal freedoms still making policies that regulate what Muslim women choose to wear?